You're listening to the Three Ropes Podcast with Scott Fineout. On the HTW Network.
Paul Bo, thanks for being here today.
What a pleasure. What a pleasure it is to be your third guest on the Three Ropes Podcast. And I got a special gift for you. Look at this.
Oh, look at this.
I am wearing my Three Ropes with Scott Fineout autographed shirt. I am the first one, even on the third guest, I'm the first one to get a shirt with your name on it, and I am wearing it proud. I was at the gym today, hanging and banging, and they said to me, the hell is Three Ropes, and who the hell is Scott Fineout? I said, long story, you wouldn't want to know. If you have about two, as Jeff Carden says, 2 hours, I will tell you. My Jeff Carden doll is sitting right beside me here, and we have to talk about that a little bit. The Jeff Carden action figure, you squeeze his legs, and he counts to two.
Oh, man.
We always said Hobart couldn't count to three, but Carden can get to two. And what do you think of the figure, though? It's one of 5 made. Look at this thing. It looks just like Carden. How scary is that? I
was about to say, whoever did the art on that did a really good job, because that really does definitely look like Jeff Carden.
Johnny St. Clair saw it this morning. It was sitting on my half wall there, and he goes, where did you get the Carden doll? And I'm like, somebody must have made it. He goes, boy, that looks just like him. I'm like, yeah, look, anatomically correct and everything. Look at the flat front like a Ken doll. Shoot.
There's a big region there, but it looks flat. Yeah, you're right.
Oh, yeah, it's flat. It's a Ken doll, yeah.
He needs to fire his manager, that's for sure.
So we're going to set Jeff Carden up right over here behind the at PW Paul Bo logo there, even though I don't even know if that's my handle, but you could find me there. So,
well, people put that into Google. I think it'll come up. And look, you are the third guest, but if it means anything to you, and I know we talked about this before we got on here, you are the interview that I had to work the hardest for, and not to your fault, my internet's fault. As I drove in here today, in an hour just to get to good internet. That's how badly I'm out. So I appreciate you taking the second to give me a second chance here, and I appreciate the merch grab too. That's awesome. You got that Jeff Carden doll. Man, that does look real. Did you get into? Have you gotten into collecting at all?
Well, I mean, I always collected stuff when I was younger, and more so now. I sell more stuff on eBay and stuff like that. Have a direct account with Mattel for all the new action figures. And everybody would say to me all the time, why don't you sit up at your shows? I'm like, yeah, are you crazy? Like the aggravation I have to deal with. Let Tim Embler set it up and let Tim make all the money and let Tim deal with the aggravation of selling figures. I don't want any aggravation with the show, yet alone selling figures. I had no time to do something like that. But no, I collect them. And for my kids, I would get, when we had names come in, if they had an action figure, I had an extra one. I know I got a Jimmy Hart one signed. I got a DDP, Kevin Nash, Mankind, Booker T, Ryback. I still have them in my back thing. They're in cases, and it's there. So someday, if, who knows, if they're ever worth anything and they want to sell them, they can sell them whatever they want. Tito Santana, I got a nice one there signed for him. And the Jimmy Hart one's my favorite because he signed it with like a pink Sharpie. And it looks really, really good. Yeah.
Word on the street is that Ryback's still angry at having to sign that for you. He wants his money. I don't know what that means.
No, he wasn't mad at me. That was another story. We have a good relationship.
Oh man, he was angry at me, and I was in Orlando. I wasn't even there. I was completely under. So with the action figure stuff and stuff, do you have anything that's like really like do you have something that's easily your most prized possession, or is there something that might be favorite because of how you acquired that, or is there anything in the Paul Bo archive that we need to know about?
Well, I mean, like, I'm a huge sports fan, and I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, unfortunately. So 1988 was the first year for starting lineup. So I always wanted to have a complete run of 1988 starting lineup. So I have a complete Dolphins set. It's only 5 players: Duper, Clayton, Troy Stratford, John Offerdahl, and Dan Marino, who was the easiest one to get because he was in national cases. But the hardest one to get for me was John Offerdahl, because he was a regional piece. Nobody even knows who he is. It was a linebacker for the Dolphins. He was only available in Miami. So I had to kind of track that one down. That's probably my most prized collection possession. Other than that, I did put together a complete set of Jack's Classic Superstars. I used to send Carden pictures all the time because he collects stuff. And there was 128 figures, I believe, in the jack set. So I kind of ran them all down, and they were really, really hard to find. And then I had them all over these basement walls down here. And then my younger son took over the basement here now, where we have gorillas up and all kind of stuff. And, so I kind of got muscled out of here. So I broke it up and started to sell it, but I still have a lot of it left. But it's a pretty cool set.
Yeah, bringing names into PPW that's gotta open your eyes a little bit, make you bug eyed, like, oh my goodness, this guy's coming in. I can get this autograph pretty easily. And a lot
of times I forget, though. I'm so busy with stuff. Sometimes I would forget the figures, and it was a disaster.
Go figure. And how early did you start collecting? Were you start collecting as a kid, or was this something that you acquired?
It was something when I was a kid, and we all had, everybody had wrestling figures, the LJNs, and we used to smash them together, and because there was no video games. I mean, you had Atari that looked like, somebody drew it on a piece of paper. There was no wrestling video games. You had that little ring, and you had the LJNs, and they weighed about 10 pounds each. And Big John Studd and Hulk Hogan would have a match and smash them into each other, and your ring was all marked up from the paint that was on them and stuff like that. But really all I had when I was younger with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how kids won't ever know that with the big. I remember the Big John Stud was in the pose like this, and they were and anytime you've seen this action figure, it would have, like you were saying, little spots of blue paint or red paint.
Yeah. I wish you would have told me, because I do have a bag of them out in my garage, and my buddy who really does a lot of collecting and displaying, he cleaned them up for me, and he got all those marks off them. He used degreaser, and he basically gave them in a bath of that, and I have them out in the garage. They're actually, they're still, the paint's coming off a little bit, but there's no marks on them anymore. I have Hogan and Stud and the Sheik, and I think I have Hillbilly Jim, but I have them out in my garage. I would have brought them in if I'd known. Instead, I brought in Jeff Carden. He says, two.
Well, Jeff Carden continues to ruin everything. I think it's safe
absolutely.
And it's weird because with action figures and stuff, I can't really get into the new stuff because I really love the Hasbro stuff.
Sure.
I love that stuff, and kids won't, I don't think, know just how good these action figures were. What was your earliest memory of pro wrestling? When did you first start understanding, hey, these guys are wrestling and this is something I should watch?
Well, I was always intrigued by it, but my dad and a bunch of his buddies, my dad coached baseball for 20 some years, and all his buddies were into wrestling. And I remember they went up to the Scranton CYC, was their first event they went. I remember my mom wouldn't let me go. She's like, "You're too young for that." I'm like, "Oh boy, whatever." So my dad and all his buddies went, and he came home and he brought me the program, and I still have it, the actual insert sheet, up in my mom's house. And it was the main event was Hogan versus I believe it was Bob Backlund. I think it was Hogan and Backlund in the main, or Hogan and the Sheik, or one of the two was the main event. But Hogan was there, and my dad wrote next to all the winners who won the matches, how much the time was, and I still do have that sheet. But that's my earliest memory of wrestling. And then wrestling started to come around here to Hazleton, to Holy Family Academy, St. Joe's Gym, where we run PPW. So my grandmother lived a block away from there. My dad had this big Lincoln, I was probably, I don't know, maybe early 80s. I was probably 10 or 11. I was a little younger than that. It's probably in the 70s. So it's probably maybe 7 years old. So I'm riding down in the car. We're coming from my grandmother's house, and there was wrestling going on at Holy Family. And the wrestlers used to go in through the back, like they do now. And we're coming down the famous fight on 5th Street there. We're driving down 5th Street, and we see a wrestler walking in. So my dad pulls up, and who's walking in but Nikolai Volkoff. Now, Nikolai Volkoff was a huge heel then, and he's, huge. So he's walking in, and my dad goes, "Hey, Nikolai, come over and say hi to my son." So Nikolai walked over to the car, and I rolled down the window in the front seat again. No seatbelt, no nothing, wild, wild west. And Volkoff goes, right to me. He scared the crap out of me. My heart was beating him, and my dad was laughing. And Volkoff didn't break character at all. He turned around, had the big Russian hat on, and walked into the Holy Family Academy. I was petrified. So fast forward years later, I run into Nikolai Volkoff and doing a show, And I tell him that story. And then, we brought him into PPW. And I'm like, the last time when I saw you, I was only like 5 or 6 years old or whatever. You scared the crap out of me out in the street out there. And he was, laughing. And he remembered wrestling there. He obviously didn't remember that event, but he scared the crap out of me. That's my earliest memory with pro wrestling, though.
It's cool. That's a cool thought, because like a lot of times when you're talking to these guys and you can tell them a memory of like, oh, I remember when this happened. I remember when that happened. Not a lot of times can you do that 30 years later, whatever it is, at the exact same spot that happened. I think that's a really cool thing. Like it kind of comes full circle, right? Where you bring him in and it's a really cool show, a really cool story there. Now, who were you a fan growing up? When you were growing up as a kid, who'd you get your cart behind?
Well, we used to go to obviously to the Scranton CYC before wrestling started coming to St. Joe's, because Scranton CYC was almost every month. Like they would have a house show there. If it wasn't every month, it seemed like every month. My favorite wrestler was Tony Garea and Rick Martel, my favorite tag team. I used to like Rick Martel and Tony Garea, and I have pictures somewhere at my mom's, because there was no video cameras or anything like that. They just took a Polaroid camera and had to get them developed, of them in the ring with their navy blue trunks with the red trim, and they would wrestle the Moondogs or the Samoans or somebody there, because they were a huge babyface team, Garea and Martel. And it's funny, I remember in Scranton, it was so hot in that building. I mean, excruciating hot, especially in the summer. No air conditioning, of course. They used to sell these little orange drinks. They were like the little things you get in school with the chocolate milks and the vanilla milk, white milks.
The carton thing.
Yeah, the little cartons, the little orange ones.
Okay.
And they'd be piss warm. Like they wouldn't even be cold. They'd be piss warm. So, you get your program when you walked in, have all the matches, you'd look, and you'd be drinking your warm orange drink, which was god awful. And everybody would, instead of just putting it in the garbage, they'd throw it in the ring. So like these guys were coming to the ring. There was no barricades or anything like that. They're walking to the ring, and the security would walk, and they'd be getting pelted with orange cartons. The heels, they'd be throwing the orange juice cartons at them. And at the end of the night, the whole shebang would end up with cartons in the ring. It would just be a mess. Yeah.
Ring crew must have loved that.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Cleaning up the mess there.
They had to have been pretty impressed. So was that where you went to your first show at the CYC?
Yeah, that was my first show, was up there as the first place I went. And I don't remember the card or not, but I remember Pedro Morales was there. I remember he was walking. I was so happy I got to pat him on the back when he was walking to the ring, and he wrestled. He wrestled Don Morocco, the Magnificent Morocco. That was like the main event that night there. But then after the show, everybody would go in the back alley where the wrestlers would come out, and people would wait for them to try to get autographs. So obviously there wasn't much of pictures because nobody had cameras. You try to get signatures and stuff like that. And Hogan was there. We seen Hogan there, and it was good. It was a good time, and one I'll always remember. Put it that way. You know what I mean? And that's.
You mentioned like when you were a fan, like patting them on the backs and stuff. Like my thing when I went to my first live show is I was telling this to Mitch last week, where Greg Valentine just happened to be the first one that came out with music, and it was the stupidest song. It was just like this hammer hitting this anvil, like it was nothing, but it blasted over the PA, and I remember as a kid, I'm like, wow, like this is big time. Like, is that like your kind of big time thing, or like was there a moment when you went to that show where you were like, wow, like I'm here, I'm hooked, this is something that I have to do again live?
The first time I saw Hogan, and the music hit, the American, I'm a real, that when that hit, when it comes crashing down, like I remember the hair on my arm stood up. Like you got so pumped up, and and he came out of my pointing and brother and the posing, and oh my god, and it was just incredible how he had the crowd in his hand, and
that was like your larger than life moment.
Oh my god, yeah. And I remember like I got a T-shirt at the one store at the mall. It was called Pal Joey's, and they used to make, this is before we could order like 3-rope shirts and have them in 2 days. Right. You have to go there, and they'd have the press, and they'd press the letters. I got an American made shirt on for Hulk Hogan for the next time he was coming to Holy Family there, St. Joe's, and I cut the things in the back, like he had the cuts in the back. And I remember my mother or my grandmother actually, why are you cutting that shirt up? She said, I just bought it for you. I said, you don't understand. That's the Hulkster. She's like, who? I'm like, you wouldn't understand.
She just sees you cutting this garment that she just like spent her hard-earned money for.
Yeah. So, but I mean, my dad was a huge wrestling fan with all his buddies, and unfortunately, my dad passed away in 2011. So that was really 2 years before I got into wrestling because, and I've told you this many times, and everybody, my dad would have been at every show. He would have said he hated it because that's how he was. He always did, this is junk. He'd be in the busting balls. He'd be in first row at every show, and he'd be in the locker room. And I guarantee you, every member of our roster would love my dad because they all did. When he coached baseball for 20 some years, he just, if he can see it now, like I said, the sports broadcasting and wrestling, and I know he can, but if he was there in person, he'd be at every show and he'd be in the front row and everybody would have a good time. So, but and
he's the one who brought you to your first show.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Of course. Me. I guess I grew up outside of Hazleton. I grew up in Partysville, which is like 2 miles outside of Hazleton, right in the same compound area as E. Julius Kuiper, who's much younger, but we all kind of lived in the same area, in a little block there. And I had 3 brothers and a sister, so there's 5 of us. So it was probably me and my brother Jeff that went to the show because we're all 3 years apart. And then Camarelli is younger. He's 16 years younger than me, so he was a pup. He wasn't even thought of yet. But it was probably me and my dad and my brother Jeff probably went. I think he did. I'm not even sure. I don't remember. But a couple of his buddies and their kids I knew were my age, and we all went and piled into Lincoln Continental and went up to Scranton to drink warm piss orange drink.
Well, they did a good job of keeping it warm in there with the no AC, so they could
sell
you.
It was brutal.
They didn't even give you the reward. They just made you.
Oh, it was so bad. I still can vividly remember how hot it was in there. You'd be soaked. I was a kid. Kids don't sweat. You'd be drenched. Sweat be running on your back into your friggin' never mind.
It's like there's a problem when I just got done playing football. Didn't really sweat that much, but I'm sitting here in a seat watching wreshling, and I'm sweating. And
it smells like an Italian deli in here with everybody friggin' sweating.
Now you mentioned Hulk Hogan, and we're all fans here. Did you follow him over to WCW during the war, as they say, or were you kind of a loyalist to the WWF, where I believe you probably started, right?
Yeah, I mean, like my brother Jude Camarelli, he liked WCW, so I used to watch it with him because he loved Sting. Sting was his favorite one. So we'd watch WCW and Nitro. Kind of got away from WWE for a little bit. I did like WCW, and the run that they had. And we used to kind of flip-flop on Monday nights back and forth. Like, Goldberg came around and, they had the streak and, we kind of flip-flopped around.
Well, now, for the best transition in HDW network history, we're just going to switch the topic. How did you get first involved with pro wrestling? How did you get into this crazy circus?
Oh boy. Well, young guy by the name of James Vasquez. You remember James?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
He was coming down to the YMCA to work out, and I met him down there. And he'd be, lifting and stuff like that. Would just be bullshit and talking and he'd ask me what I do, and I'd ask him, what do you do? Oh, I'm a wrestler. What? A wrestler? Like a professional wrestler? Now, this is like 2012, I'm going to say maybe the end of 2011. I was blind by independent wrestling. I really didn't know much about it. Didn't really follow it at all because, my Jonathan was like 10 years old, so he was just starting to like wrestling a little bit. So I was kind of getting back into it a little bit because there was a lull for maybe 5 years or something. I didn't watch anything at all, like nothing, just nothing.
Right.
And so I talked to James, and James is telling me he used to wrestle, and he showed me, I'm going to bring a poster in here and hang it up at the Y. I'm like, yeah, go ahead. I don't own this place, but go ahead. So he had a poster up.
There, and don't worry about it.
Yeah, hang it up on the wall there. And I'm like, who the hell's this guy? Who's this guy? He's ripped. Oh, that's Tommy Swade, he said. I said, who? Tommy Swage. You know Tommy? He's from West Hazleton. I said, no, I don't know Tommy, but he's going to come down and work out with me, he said. And, I'll introduce you to him. I'm like, oh, cool. All right. So Tommy came down, and Tommy's quiet. If Tommy doesn't know you, he really doesn't talk to you much. So I kind of met him, and he was cool, and just cordial, said hello. So James said to me, do you want to come to a show? I said, where is this? And he said, McAdoo at the Strand. I'm like, you guys run wrestling there? The place is like a shoebox.
Held up by rubber bands.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, we're having a show here. I have tickets to sell. Would you buy 2 tickets? Sure. Let me see if Jonathan wants to go. So Jonathan and I bought 2 tickets. I'm like, could I get front row? He's like, oh, yeah, you can get front row. Well, little did I know that there's 20 people there. I had no idea.
You're like, wow. Yeah.
So we walk into the show, and we get there. The bell time, I think, was supposed to be, let's just say 7 o'clock. So we got there, maybe 6:15. So we sit down. There's like nobody there. They're still putting together a ring. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, my God almighty, right? So there's a lady sitting next to me, and I can't remember her name, but she used to do photography, and I met her, over the years when we start doing stuff. So she was there, and
was that Trish Strong?
No, I don't remember. I think she had red hair. I don't remember what her name was. But she was
CW era, right? Is this what the company?
I think it was Prince. What was his name? Akamara.
Prince Akhenaten.
I think the lady was there with his mother. I think that was his mom that was sitting there in the front row talking to this lady, and they were right next to Jonathan and I. And she's asking me, are you a wrestling fan? And talking to Jonathan, I'm like, oh, I know James. He asked me to come, and so I text James in the back. I'm like, what the hell's the holdup? Like, it's 10 after 7. He goes, oh yeah, we're gonna be starting in about 10 minutes. So now it's 7:30. Now you've been to ECPW, and so have I, and and even PPW, we were late start, never late like them. So now it's 7:30. The show's still not starting. Jonathan ate just about everything from the concession stand that was at the Strand already, so he's getting bored. I'm getting annoyed, right? So I text James again. I'm like, James, what match are you? Because I'm probably leaving. I'm not staying here. I'm match number 3, he said, or 3 or 4. I'm like, when is this friggin' show going to start? He's, they should be starting soon. Well, the show started at like 8 o'clock, like an hour late. So I'm fit to be tied to begin with, because I don't want to even, I'm here for Jonathan. I don't want to stay here. So first match, I don't even know who it was. The first thing I noticed was the ring announcer comes out. He is wearing a white suit and a white hat. I never saw this kid again ever in my life after this first night. He comes out. I text James, who the hell is this ring announcer? He said, I don't know. We didn't have a ring announcer, so they just got somebody. I said, this kid's awful. He don't even know how to read the height, the weight, the weights. He didn't even know who was wrestling. He had a notebook in his hand instead of like a little card. He had a big notebook, and it just excuse me 1 second. Johnny St. Clair is calling me.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Let me see what he wants real quick. This will be good on the air.
Okay, go ahead. Put him on.
Yeah, John. What, Jonathan? What do you want? I'm downstairs. I'm doing this podcast with Scott.
Johnny St. Clair always getting in my way.
I will, but not right now. When I'm done with it, I will. I don't know. We won't be that long. When I'm done, I will. Well, yeah, you can use the car. Go ahead. Just take it. The keys are there. All right. Yeah, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere right now. All right, and there you go. There's some live TV. Johnny St. Clair calling from 2 floors up. Well, I don't know if I'd go pick him up Chinese food. So I said, we're doing a podcast, and I said, take the car if you want it. You want to go take the car.
Honestly, I don't want this podcast to get in the way of anybody getting Chinese food. So I'm fine with that interruption. We're not even going to edit that out. We're not even.
So anyway, let's get back to the ECPW.
Well, before you do, I want to add this little factoid about Prince Akhenaten. I don't know if you knew, this is the greatest name for a tour ever. He was going on this like retirement tour, right? And it was the Prince. I cannot believe I'm still doing this tour. And it was amazing. What a great name. But yeah, continue on, since Johnny St. Clair interrupted us.
Yeah, well, that's of live TV there. So anyway, hey, I learned some stuff watching your little tidbit on your podcast. I'll tell you that Mitch was in the marching band. I never would have guessed that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
From the marching band right to the football team. This
to the gridiron, to the monsters of the Midway.
Yeah, it's hard not to like that guy.
So this kid's announcing, and James is like, we didn't have an announcer. And I'm like, well, why didn't you ask me? He's like, you can do that? I'm like, yeah, you can do that. Better than this guy, right? So anyway, we watched the show. It was an absolute disaster. No. I think the main event might have been Tommy and Jason. So the main event was pretty good. I think that's what it was. I think it was Tommy and Jason. So I'm like, cool. These guys at least know what they're doing, you know? Yeah. So after the show, Johnny St. Clair is hungry. So I said, come on, we'll go to Damon's. So we go to Damon's, and who's sitting there but Tommy? He was sitting there with his wife, and they were waiting to get something to eat. And I'm like, hey, Tommy, what's up? And he's like, hey, not much. I said, we just at the show. He's like, oh, I said, I brought him. He wanted to see it. Did he like it? Oh, yeah, he liked it, blah, blah, blah. So James texts me, how'd you like? James wrestled Tyrone Kidd. I remember that match. How'd you like the show? I'm like, yeah, it was all right. Jonathan had a good time. I said, dude, you guys need a ring announcer. Why don't you get me in there? And he's like, well, I'll ask. I'm like, okay, well, who are you going to ask? I'll get you in the next show. I'll see if I can get you to announce the next show. So saw him at the gym the next week, and I just kept bugging him. Could you connect me with somebody to get on this show? Well, I'll talk to Gino. I'm like, well, do you guys have a ring announcer? He's like, not really. Ryan did some ring announcing. This kid did it. I'm like, we really don't have one. I'm like, listen, I'll do it. Now, I'm not even thinking, it's ECPW, so I know nobody's getting paid. So that's the first thing. I wasn't even thinking of that. You know what I mean? I'm like, and he's like, well, how much money do you want? I'm like, well, I just want to do it. Did you ever do it? And I lied. And I said, oh, yeah, I've done it a lot of times, never did it in my life. Right. And so the next show they were supposed to have at the Strand, I was supposed to announce it. He told me I was the ring announcer. It got canceled because Freddie never got a doctor or something, like some kind of disaster like that. So it was, how many shows used to get canceled there all the time.
Yeah.
So James tells me, listen, I can't have you do the next show. They already got somebody. I'm like, who? I'm thinking already, who the hell they've got? And he's like, but there's a benefit show. And Gino said he needs a ring announcer for the benefit show. The other ring announcer can't make it. Can you do it? Sure. Where is it? At the Freeland Event Center. So the next show at the Strand, James is like, do you want to come? I'm like, yeah, I'll come. I'll introduce you to Gino. Well, that show got canceled too. So that was 2 in a row that got canceled after the other show. So now the benefit show is coming up, and I'm the ring announcer. I no idea what I'm walking into. So I go into the Freeland Event Center. First person I meet in wrestling is David Starr. First person that comes up to me, shakes my hand. Really, he was just, starting. Super nice, talk to him. The second person I meet is Digger. Digger thinks that I'm from the state. Because I'm in a suit. He thinks I'm from the state. He has no idea who I am. He goes, and Digger immediately throws Gino under the bus. Immediately, as soon as he sees me, he's like, just so you know, I'm only the one organizing this. Gino Caruso's the promoter. You better check his license. You better make sure he has a doctor and make sure he has insurance on this building. I said, oh boy, what the frig are you even talking about? He thought I was with the state. So he's telling me to make sure I check stuff with Gino when Gino gets there. And I never even met Gino in my life. So I had no idea what he was even talking about. And
like, at that point, did you even know that like state people came in, or were you like?
No, I didn't even know. I'm like, again. We're in the Freeland Event Center, and there's no ring. So this is, I think I got there at maybe 5:30. The show was at 7. There's no ring. There's 0 ring. The ring comes. I think Tim was driving the ring truck, and something got tied up. Not his fault, but he said so. I think it was Plasma driving the truck. I can't remember, but the ring truck showed up at like 6:30. The show's at 7. So here you go. Everybody had to go out. I took my suit jacket out. Everybody unloaded the truck as fast as they could so they can get the ring up as fast as they could so they can have, the show. So it was a benefit show. And I get all my stuff together, all my cards, and I wasn't nervous or anything like that. So, I sold a bunch of tickets for it because it was my friend. EJ actually was in the crowd. Julius is in the crowd. Really? So okay. I go out for the first match, and the first match first person I announced was Brandon Alpha. First person I ever announced was Brandon Alpha.
A good friend of mine. I like Brandon.
Yep. Against Jake Stallone. Again, that was the first match. So, I did the match, and I went in the back. And I don't remember who the second match was, but I went in the back because there was no commentary or anything. I went in the back. And Gino was back there, and he said, "Hey, Paul, come here." And I said, "Hey, what's up?" And he's like, "Who do you work for?" And I said, "Well, I don't work for anybody. What are you talking about? I just told him, I did this in college. I did announcing and stuff like that. But I never did wrestling." And he's like, "Really? You don't work for anybody?" And he's like, "Well, I want to make you my ring announcer here. When we start going back to the Stranded." And I'm like, "Okay, that's fine. That sounds good." He thought I worked for somebody. So he's like, "You're really good." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm okay. Thanks." I didn't think anything of it. And,
that's got to be a hell of a compliment. The promoter telling you that on your first time coming through, right?
Yeah. I mean, and then, I'm looking at my notes here just to keep this timeline in order here. Then I met Chris Levin, okay, because he was refereeing, and that's when I met Chris. And I mean, Chris still looks like he's 16 years old.
So you met Chris Levin at ECPW?
ECPW, I met him at.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he refereed there. Yeah, so me and him hit it off in the beginning. Like, him and I hit it off, and we talked back and forth and stuff like that. And he's like, he's another one that asked me the same thing. He's like, "Who else do you work for?" I said, "Well, nobody. Is there?" I didn't even know there was any other federations. I had no idea who it was. And he's like, "Listen, you got to make a promo video, and you need to send it around to people because you're good. And I think you'll get booked on shows." Now, Chris was just starting and stuff. Like, he came with David Starr. They were buddies, and they always hung out together. And he's like, "Listen, you need to send this out to different people." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I only know how to write a resume for a job." He's like, "What's the same way? Just write a resume, and you can put my name down as a reference, and whoever else, tell them you work for Gino at ECPW, and can you make a video?" I don't know how to make a video. I have no idea. So after doing a couple shows, I asked Freddie to make me a video of my, and the video, it's funny. The video is still on YouTube. It's under my real name, but it's on YouTube. To book me, it has my cell phone number, and he put together little snippets. You could look it up. It is still on YouTube to this day, though. It's the promo video. Like I said, it's under my real name. So
that's interesting. You say that it's under your real name. Why is it that you shorten your name for wrestling? Is it something that maybe a Google search wouldn't pick up your real name, and you want to separate your pro life from your wrestling life? What's the motivation behind that?
Well, there was no motivation. It was actually a mistake. That's how it happened.
Okay.
I just set up a Facebook account, and I was putting my name in there, and I was at work, and we were kind of doing some stuff, and I put in Paul Bo, and I entered it instead of Paul Bonomo, which is my real name.
Yeah.
I put in Paul Bo, and when I saved it to Facebook, people were messaging me, "Hey, it says Paul Bo on there." I'm like, "Oh, well, I didn't even know how to put at PW Paul Bo on here." So you know how technologically advanced I am. So
you went to the Chop Saw Outlaws School of Technology.
Yeah, well, a little better than that. So I kind of just left it at that. And people think my name is Paul Bo. Like, I'm not even like, when people see me, even like for sports broadcasting, I kept it as Paul Bo. Like, they call me Paul Bo. When I'm at, "Hey, Paul Bo," everybody, no one knows my last name. And that's fine. You know what I mean? But so that's how that happened.
That's
wild.
wild.
And then I just went with Paul Bo. And
that is so wild.
I also wanted to, and this came a little bit later once we started announcing, because then I start getting messages from different people that were running shows. Did I want to do? I met Lance at a show. I met Lance at, I believe
Lance on Hawaii.
Lance on Hawaii at one of the ECPW shows he was doing for Gino. I don't think it wasn't the Elmira one. That was after. But he said to me, "My dad runs WXWC4. If we ever need an announcer, can we use you?" Sure. I'm like, that's big time. Sure.
Now, did you know who his dad was at the time? When
yeah. I knew
okay,
Sam.
okay.
Yeah, I knew of Sam.
Because you're from that area, and everybody knows.
Yeah, I didn't know him personally, but
right.
I knew of him, and I remember it was a time in October. I was out putting a graveyard out in my front yard with my kid, and Lance messaged me, and he's like, "Hey." And so did David Starr. They both messaged me because David Starr was working for WXW. Lance is like, "Hey, we need a ring announcer for tonight. Can you come down?" This is the day of the show. I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I packed my stuff. I went down there, and I wanted to get my name out there, and I did it. And and that's how I met Carolina Jim there. He was there also because someone else called him. So him and I basically split the show. That's kind of how I did. So I got into doing some stuff with WXW, PCWA. I knew the guy that owned that through my real job. So he asked me about doing some of his shows. And then I met Sean, who runs True, just from doing PPW, because he used to wrestle for the company that ran in Hazleton, the HGW or whatever they were called when they started running down there. So I met Sean. I started announcing for True. And then I met Joe Rogers online. He was doing a show, and that's how I started doing stuff for Apex and for BCW wrestling. But me, I love marketing. So I love marketing myself to ring announce. So I wanted to think of something that I could kind of have as my, not like Let's Get Ready to Rumble. Michael Buffer has Let's Get Ready to Rumble. I wanted something to have that they knew Paul Bo by. So my friend Ron Harris would always do a point, always. He'd point this, and point west, and point this. He'd take pictures of him pointing to mountains. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. And he goes, yeah, you should use that for wrestling. I go, you know what? I think I might. And I started doing the point thing. Yep. And, people would always see me and to do it right back to me. And I'm like, oh, my God. Like, Jesus God. You know what I mean? But it caught on. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to make T-shirts. I don't think any other ring announcer at that time had T-shirts. So I made T-shirts that said, I'm a Bo Peep.
I'm still waiting for that second run.
And there was a couple different ones because Camarelli had his own T-shirt. It said Camp Camarelli. But so I did that, and I'm like, should I buy these? Like, how much do they cost? So do I have to give them to people? Like, are people actually going to buy them? And I sold, I think I got 36 shirts printed. I sold every one.
Wow.
And then I bought more, and I sold all of them. And I'm like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. People, obviously they buy anything. Hey, I bought a 3-rope shirt, but that was because of you.
But here's the thing. It's really real is that you get into a thing like pro wrestling, which you said a couple of years ago, you weren't even really following.
No, not at all.
And then you come in and the promoter tells you that you do a good job. Then you decide that you're going to sell T-shirts, and fans buy them and they start pointing back at you. Which one of those things was really the thing that said, okay, I'm accepted? Like, I feel comfortable now. Was it Gino? Was it the fans buying the T-shirts? Was it the pointing catching on? Which one of those three things do you think kind of motivated you to be like, okay, I'm onto something here?
I'm going to give the credit there to Gino. I really am, because he didn't have to say yes. You know what I mean? He could have very easily said, no, I don't even know this guy. You know what I mean? And, then came the show in Elmira. They were supposed to have, that's where I met you at that Elmira show. And that was supposed to be, and then I think it was either Keith or Holbert or somebody messaged me. And Holbert was doing announcing at the time. And they said, will you be the ring announcer for this show up in Elmira? It's going to be a huge show. And that's a whole nother story, about that. But do you want to do that show? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that show. That's in a big arena, and sure. And then it just started, I started thinking, and then I met some other guys who announced, like Dave Adams. You know what I mean? I met Dave Adams. I know he was doing a lot of announcing and still does. I just talked to him the other day. But, you were more accepted into the ring announcer brotherhood. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I'll be honest with you, even the workers, from the first day I got there, the guys I didn't know at all, they were all super, super nice to me. Super nice and accepting, and and I, me, I'm so anal with stuff. I study announcers, know that,
Yep.
I studied ring announcers, so I didn't sound like an idiot. I listened to Michael Buffer or Bruce Buffer, who does MMA, or Justin Roberts, or Tony Chimmel, or Dave Penzer, or even so much as Michael Capetta. You know what I mean?
I loved him.
just stuff like that. I wanted to get the cadence down, because I think even doing sports broadcasting, the cadence in your voice, and I'm a criminal justice major, and I work for a financial company. So I have no background in broadcasting. Zero.
Right.
Zero. So I just think that's so important to have cadence in your voice and to make people want to listen to what you have to say, whether you're on commentary or whether you're ring announcing, So I think that, and I studied my ass off just listening to different people. I used to have it on my cell phone and to be just announcing introductions, of Christian or Jeff Hardy, what I mean? Just stuff like that, and even at the end of the match, do you want to say, here is your winner, or do you want to say the winner of this bout? Just different things to change your voice and stuff.
It matters. And a lot of people wouldn't, think that, right? When you're put into that position of having to like go through and dissect every minute detail, I think that's important. And I think so far your story has been very motivating and very very encouraging to people who might have a skill, say, and I'll put his name out there, a guy like Mitch, Tom Mitchell, who has a lot of talent, and he might be looking to branch out further. He might be looking to explore new avenues and things like that. What do you say to people who have the talent like you did, who it just came to them, or they studied, or what would you say to them who are looking to maybe like branch out and do something more? How do you do that? How do you go from one company to multiple ones like you have?
Well, I mean, I think good word travels. Pay your dues, as everybody says. Help out with whatever you can, whether it's postering, whether it's promoting, whether it's putting the friggin' ring up. I can't tell you how many times I did that. I hate it, but I did it. Do whatever job they ask you to do. When we talk about the sports broadcasting I do, I mean, I did sideline reporting for a basketball event in Atlanta because that was what they needed me to do. I did interviews backstage at wrestling. Don't like it. Didn't like to do it, but you want to learn all aspects of the job, and people, it's like any other job. I mean, no one's in independent wrestling on our level to make any kind of money. We all have, you know what I mean? There's guys that are super indie guys that do this for a living, and God bless them because they can make a lot of money out of it. We're not looking to do that. I'm just looking to have a good time. And the money came in other aspects for me is with sports broadcasting where I made some good money. But yeah, I mean, you just got to get your name out there, and Mitch is good. He's young, he's motivated, and he's a great help. I love the kid. He just, listen to other people. There's going to be people that hate you. There's going to be people that love you, but whatever. It's like anything else. You take the negatives with the positives, but always listen to the veterans. You know what I mean? Tommy Swade helped me so much with stuff, with interviews, just getting to know Tommy, and he's been such a huge part with PPW and just his the way he looks at things with wrestling. There's a lot of it I never thought about. When I got into it, and not that I ever put together a match because I really never didn't, he was telling me, and, just watching, even when I did a couple of things for WXW, watching Samu tell the guy, everybody doesn't have to go 100 miles an hour. There are rest spots. There are places where you want to come back and feed the crowd. I never even knew that existed. I didn't understand the storytelling part of it. I just understand guys going 100 miles an hour doing crazy stuff and people loving it. I remember we brought a tag team in, the PPW, and Tommy watched them in a match. And Tommy said, I can work with these guys. And not just doing crazy spots, he put together reasons for the spots and what a difference it was the second time we saw them. You know what I mean? Just stuff like that. I don't want to get off topic, but yeah. You just keep learning stuff like that. And that brings me into even commentating, always studying commentators, always listening to them, to what they have to say. Your job is out there is to tell a story and make it interesting, and I had some bad habits when I first started. I mean, if it was a terrible match, might have kind of went unprofessional on it in different federations. And I did, I admit it. And that's totally uncalled for. And, but sometimes you're put in a spot that it's just like that bad. And I'm just like, nobody's ever going to watch this. We've been there. We have. And you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that,
Correct.
But
you're human. So how far in were you when we met in Elmira? Were you were into WXW? You were doing WXW shows?
I did WXW a few times when they needed somebody. I wasn't doing it much. Whenever they needed me, I filled in. I helped out Lance and Samu. I worked with Alpha when Alpha had Battlefield.
Yeah, yep.
I did all of his shows. I was his ring announcer he did 3 or 4 shows. I did all of them. And he had some really, really good talent there. And so did WXW with Samu. A lot of guys that, are now in WWE or Leo Rush, Patrick Clark, the Velveteen Dream. They worked at WXW. They came from MCW, but they did shows there. I mean, Alpha had Kurt Hawkins, Ted DiBiase, Tommy Dreamer. He had, because he knew all those guys, Carlito, Snitsky, everybody. I'm going to say Elmira. I don't know what year that was. Well, 7 years ago. I think it was 2014. It just came up in my feed. So I was like 2 years maybe in announcing, somewhere around there. About 2. I never did commentating. I was still doing just announcing.
Good word did travel, because I remember back then they said that they were going to bring you in, and I'd never talked to you before, and I remember just this really put together guy that sounded great, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. We're going to pull out the big hitters here. We're going to bring up a commentator and Jim. To his credit, he was doing commentating. He was all for bringing you in. It was right. I don't know if it was his idea, but I know that he was very much behind it.
I think Zimmer actually messaged me. I think Keith actually messaged me.
That sounds right.
And I think they were a little. I think they thought I was going to say no. I didn't think they think I was going to do it. You know what I mean? But I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I didn't care. So it was a good time. It was fun. The whole show was a disaster, but I mean, it was all right. It was all right.
Yeah,
the experience we can never forget.
It was an experience. That was.
I remember running up and down the friggin' steps up to the interview room when I was doing the backstage interviews up in the top in the press box with, oh my God, I think Brandon Alpha was one. Who else was there? There was a ton of guys that we interviewed up there. And I kept running up, and you were running up and down the steps too. And it was just, we did like 4 takes, on 4 different guys. Boom, boom, boom. 1 take each. Tell them what you're going to do against Jay Freddy or not Jay Flyer. Tell them what you're going to do against this guy. Tell them what you're going to do this guy. And we're just raveling off generic stuff, but we got it all done.
That was a show that it was before IWTV existed or Fight TV or any of the streaming services that and we put together an iPay-per-view of some sort. And there were like 33 people that bought the thing. And I feel sorry for them, because my performance certainly wasn't good that night. I was pissed off, but yeah. And then, so how far after that do you get into PPW, and how does that come about? Is it part of the thing you talked about earlier, where networking and good words will travel and you'll just find yourself in this opportunity?
That show we might have been just starting PPW then. That might have overlapped a little bit, because I remember you sent me a message the one time telling me you were going to ring announce somewhere, and you were asking me for pointers. I do remember that. Mm-hmm. You ring announced somewhere, and I remember I gave you.
I did it in Binghamton, and I asked you because I was so impressed with you that night in Elmira that I was like, I need to ask this guy what he does. I don't want to sound like an idiot.
And I probably sound like an idiot giving you a million different things. But anyway, the way it happened with PPW was Ryan was involved with ECPW, and something happened. I don't know. He got in a pissing match with somebody, so he quit. So Tony wasn't even involved with ECPW then. He was already done wrestling. So Tony would come to the McAdoo shows,
like out of the business.
Yeah, he wasn't doing anything. Yeah, he was just maybe it was only a year or so. It wasn't long. But I know he wasn't wrestling. I didn't even know he wrestled, but I knew Tony's father-in-law really well through softball. So I would talk to him at the shows and stuff like that. He'd come to the shows, and Ryan called me to one day I was going to a Raw show, and we talked about this on the other podcast. And Ryan said, "Hey, we're thinking of all breaking away from ECPW. We want to start our own thing." I'm like, "Okay, that's fine." I mean, there's really hasn't been any shows in McAdoo. Stuff was kind of just dragging along, canceled here, didn't have a doctor. And I wasn't doing anything. Like, it was just like, I do WXW once in a while if they needed me. If PCWA needed me, I would do it. But I'm like, hey, this will be a steady thing. It'll be every month. And then Tony called me, and Tony's like, hey, did you talk to Ryan about starting this thing? I have a thing with the Helping Hands. Now, I think Tony set that up through the Helping Hands, and it's going to be a benefit show. We're going to run up the church or the plaza. Would you want to be involved? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So that's kind of how we got in. I got involved with PPW was, Ryan called me, then Tony called me, then we kind of, I talked to Tony in the early part of it, setting that up more than I would see Ryan, just to get stuff set up. And then Ryan and Tony did a lot on their own because I really wasn't involved with it. And then we kind of just all got together like 2 weeks before the show and kind of went through everything. But that's how we got involved with that. That was only supposed to be one show.
Yeah, it was for Helping Hands, which is a nonprofit in Hazleton, which devotes its organization and its time and efforts to special needs children. And I think they run some toddler and daycare and stuff like that classes for mothers and stuff in the area. So that was a really cool thing. Do you remember why it was Helping Hands, or were you guys just looking to help somebody out in the area and looking for a good time to do it?
Yeah, I have no idea why it was. I think Tony set all that up, to be honest with you. I don't know if he knew someone there, but that was the charity he picked, was Helping Hands. I know Amazon made a donation also, where he worked. So it was it was just, and that was what we were going to do, just one show. And then, we saw how well it went, and we said, hey, let's, we got the Freeland Event Center. That was our home before we had Holy Family. And we started doing shows there, and we started getting bigger crowds and bigger crowds. And then, I talked to EJ and my brother, and they're like, hey, why don't you, EJ called me the one night, and he said, could me and Jude Camarelli do commentary for PPW? We'll just air it on YouTube. I'm like, well, yeah, sure, if you want us. I talked to Tom, I'm like, do you care if these guys do commentary? He's like, no, I don't care. So they started doing the commentary. And then my brother works at a TV station, said, hey, would you guys want to put PPW on to WYLN and run it every week? And I'm like, sure, what's it going to cost us? We talked, and I said, well, we need a name for this TV show. And, I have the original names written down for our TV show,
great.
What it was. And I'm like, so it was me, EJ, and Ryan. We're trying to think of names, and we were going to use Adrenaline. But ECPW has Adrenaline.
Yes.
That was Gino's show. I said, no, we can't use that because that's ECPW. We're not going to use it. And then someone came up with the name of the Power Hour, which is so bad. That might have been EJ.
That's such an EJ fraternity brothers kind of deal right there.
Yeah.
Power Hour of drinking. I'm guaranteeing that's an EJ name.
Yeah, that was probably his. And then we said, well, maybe should we brand it with a year, like, PPW 2013 or whatever. And then we just said, we're looking through different things on the internet. I'm searching, what's a good name for a show. And I came across, it was a website for a power company, and it said Danger High Voltage. And I'm like, ooh, I kind of like that. It was like, there was the logo was the high voltage. It wasn't our logo, but it was Danger High Voltage, it said. I'm like, how about PPW High Voltage? And, they're like, oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. Let's use that. And that's how we got the name High Voltage. And so they start doing the TV show, and I was doing backstage interviews along with ring announcing. I wasn't doing commentary at first at all.
Right.
And I was doing the backstage stuff, and I hated it. I did get to do AJ Styles, which I thought was really cool. But Tommy would always, at the end of the show, coax me along and say, okay, we're going to interview David Starr. Now we're going to do this with Alpha. Here's what you need to say. Just pick out a way to get there. And he was so helpful in doing it, and then we would do the backstage stuff, would tape all the stuff after the show. You know what I mean? We still have some of the stuff still on YouTube, some of the interviews, but that's what I did. I did the backstage stuff. So then I segued to it. I said to EJ, why don't you do some backstage interviews? And he was petrified to do the interviews. But I got him to do some backstage
working with people he didn't know, or what was that?
Yeah, he's kind of a shy person if he doesn't know people. And he was but he came into his role, and he did really well. So I was saying to Tony the one time, I said, I really want to do commentary, because Tommy sat with them a couple times and did commentary and helped EJ and Jude along, because they never did it. But Tommy would sit in, because Tommy was a heel. So Tommy would sit in while one of his guys were wrestling, and he'd kind of quarterback the whole thing and feed it to them. And hey, I listened to that early commentary. It was bad. We just didn't know what we were doing. It was bad. So I think it might have been Tommy suggested, or one of those guys said, why don't you sit down and do commentary with them? I'm like, Jesus, I never did it. So, okay, I'll do it. So I sat down and did the commentary with them. I think the first show I ever really did commentary with was our Super Show. We had a ton of people at Holy Family. It's still the backdrop on one of my social media pages of just the whole background of Holy Family. You just see a slew of people.
Are you talking about the picture with you, EJ, and Camarelli in front of the Holy Family?
Yes.
I guess what was that? The scorers table?
Scorers table, yep. That is the picture. Yep, that is the picture. And it was
what's funny is like that picture in itself, that picture was what made me look at PPW and go, these guys know what the hell they're doing. Like these stands are packed. These guys look good. They have a desk. What's going on here? And then I see this venue that's just amazing. It's just a magical venue. It really is.
Yeah, we stood in front of
all
that.
wrestling in this show. Like, so okay, so you get into commentary, and is it immediate that you're the play-by-play guy, or is it something that you want to do? How does that happen?
Well, just back up 1 second. We go for that picture thing real quick. Our first show, we had a friend of mine that worked for Channel. I'm not even gonna say that he worked for a cable station in not even a local one, a big one in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So he got us to use a $30,000 like high definition camera for that event. So we had an actual network camera. That picture, there was lights. He had lighting for us, and we had an actual camera from a news station that the numbers are somewhere between number 1 and we'll say 35, the station. But it wasn't WLN, I can tell you that, because they don't have that kind of equipment. But it was just unbelievable, the camera he had. And we used that for actually 2 shows, the Sanjay Dutt and DJZ. Well, I don't even know what name, Michael Paris. The match, I think that was filmed with one of those high definition cameras, and you can see that on YouTube. It's you can just see how good it was. But that's what we did use for that show. So go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. So, so is it immediate that you jump into play-by-play, or is there some footage out there of Paul Bo doing color commentary?
No, I never really did the color. I jumped into the play-by-play. Before that show, I studied different announcers for probably about 2 months, so I didn't make a fool out of myself. Wanted to learn a lot of different wrestling moves because I really didn't know a lot of them besides the basic ones, and still you end up learning because every move now has 50 different names to it. So I didn't want to sound like a mark out there, like calling every single move, like tope hookah, tope con hilo and all these kind of, you try to call the basic ones, but a red arrow splash with a 450 inversion,
sliced bread number 12. It's like, right, I don't remember the first 11. I don't.
So I kind of jumped into the play-by-play, and then Camarelli fell in love, so he fell out of the mix. He stopped coming.
Is that why he stopped? Okay.
Yeah, he fell in love. So there was EJ and I, and when we did it for a while, and the first stuff isn't good. It's a learning thing. And EJ transitioned from play-by-play to basically my color guy now, but he really wasn't a heel. He was kind of a baby face, and you know what I mean? So we needed that third heel in there. So that's where Phil Bravado came in when he came in a long time down the line there.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I remember I tell this story all the time to people, and they're like, "You're really going to admit that?" I'm like, "Fuck yeah, I'm going to admit this." I remember messaging you, and I was prepared to pay you to come down and call commentary.
Damn, I should have took that money.
Like, you're out of your mind. And I'm thinking, in my head, like, I always think about this like metaphoric cardboard box in my attic, and the cardboard box in my attic is just all these memories of wrestling shows and stuff like that. And I was like, well, I need to call one with Paul Bo because I think Paul Bo is the best one here. So I need to at least like see how well I stack against that. So I remember coming down for like the first 2 or 3 shows, and it was awesome, man. And I couldn't understand why. Yeah, like EJ was really accepting, and he was really a cool dude. He was just sort of caught in between, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, me and EJ were like, well, we're both 2 color guys, but it seemed to work out. I came during Tatanka, I remember.
And, we had a couple guys that sat in with us in between, because I was looking for another guy, and they're just, a couple of them were good. There just wasn't the chemistry between the 3 of us. You know what I mean? Because people didn't know their role. They didn't know what they were supposed to call if they were doing play-by-play. And you know what I mean? We kind of tripped over each other a lot, but you learn from that. You learn from that. And then, I was doing EJ and I were doing commentary at True, which was a huge help because it was outside the PPW realm, and we got to, kind of get better at stuff like that. And like I said, we did Billtown Championship Wrestling and Apex. We were doing commentary, and I apologized for some of that stuff because some of it was really, some of the Apex stuff was just not a good setup, and it didn't sound good, and you know what I mean. It is what it is. I mean, it wasn't.
You can't apologize for it. It's all a learning. It's all a learning curve. It's all.
Well, it was just like even the setup wasn't good. You know what I mean? Like the stuff would cut in and out. You know how it is trying to set that stuff up. So we were trying to look for, but we got a lot of practice. Because PPW was once a month, so we got a lot of practice, and that's basically how everything started.
Yeah, there's with commentary, it's such a like you said, chemistry thing. I remember if you go back to the Tatanka show, you'll even hear you try to get me involved and comfortable when you're like, well, what do you think, Phil? And I'm like, say something really short, and then you're like, okay, and then you come back to me again, and like you're trying to like actively get me involved in the conversation, and it's something that's tough when you don't have partners that you're used to. I worked with Jim Holber for 4 or 5 years before that.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And then I come into you guys, and it's completely different. It's just completely dynamic. So I'm going to ask a Mark question here. Is there somebody that you tried to bring to PPW that it just fell out, and you were like, fuck, I really wanted to bring him, but it just didn't work out? And fans would be like, whoa, like, is there somebody there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Who? Could you tell us one?
Yep, the Hardy Boys.
The Hardy Boys.
Before the AEW stuff, and before when they were with him, they were doing some independent dates, and we tried to get them for a long time. And we were talking a little bit with Matt, and then, but yeah, that's one of the things. We were tried our hardest to get them. I mean, it was never like, we get emails all the time. Can you bring Hogan? Can you bring The Undertaker? Can you bring Sting? Like, They don't understand that these guys are $25,000-$30,000 a piece. Can you bring Stone Cold?
What is the thing with like Undertaker's like $10,000 an hour or something crazy
to do a signing? Yeah, something like, and that's even if they would get approved to do it. Like, it's just,
right.
You're talking astronomical prices. One thing we always wanted to do at PPW was keep the admission tickets affordable so you can bring a family, and even the meet and greets. But the stuff just gets too expensive, and then, nobody understands when you run a show, you got to pay the state, you got to pay a doctor, you got to pay a video guy, you got to pay a photographer, you got to pay a DJ, you got to pay the lighting guy, all the boys that work, the commentators, us, like, you know what I mean? Like, you got to pay them, you know what I mean? Not when at PPW, but when you go somewhere, you got to pay them, right. And you got to pay the referee something like $2 for Carden. And then you got to pay the building, and there's just a lot of expenses. So
you did a ton of that. You did a ton of that work. And is there something that how do I phrase this? Is there something that you did every month that you felt, I don't want to say underappreciated or overlooked, but just something that it cost you a lot of time, aggravation, or just, I guess time, aggravation that fans wouldn't understand you do every month? Is there something that you're like, you have no idea?
Well, it's not one thing. I think it's a combination. Postering is a pain in the ass to find someone to help you poster. Yeah. Sponsors is a pain in the ass to try to get sponsors for banners. A budget is a pain in the ass to keep a budget. And there's just so much work that goes into it. And fans don't understand that. And like even now during a pandemic, and I told you this yesterday, we were texting back and forth. Every day that I see people, whether it's the post office or out, hey, when's PPW coming? I send you that letter, that text message the lady sent me. When's PPW coming back? Don't know. It's pandemic right now. The building is off limits because of the school. There's still a million restrictions that you have to follow. And it's a lot of work. And you got to find a place. And I honestly don't know. I mean, sometime. I don't know when. Tony and I have talked about it a couple times. Don't know when. Don't know when the time's right. Don't know when you're going to get a building. And you need help. You need help. Yeah. That's huge. Yeah. But yeah, all that stuff goes, everybody thinks you just show up and the ring's up and the guardrails are up and, everybody's happy. And, I was so stressed out at the shows. So stressed out. I look back and I watch these matches now. I don't remember half of them because I was doing 500 different things.
Yeah.
I don't remember it. I love it.
You're way too humble to admit it, but there is no PPW without Paul Bo. I know how much you get every month, and
Well, I don't know about that.
And again, you're way too humble to admit it, but there is no PPW without Paul Bo. That's for sure. And one thing I think you did that was amazing, I thought you excelled at in PPW, was the merchandise and how many different things we had to sell every month, what things we had to sell every month. I think, and I say this to everybody, the thing that I can hang our hat on as a company was, man, we had a great photographer who took amazing photos. They were framed, they were signed. If there was a poster, we framed it and everyone signed it. We had trading cards. We had all these 8x10s that you were smart enough to get extras of so that we could sell them in the future. And that's something we learned. But you were really good at merchandise. What was your favorite thing that you'd come up with that you're like, genius?
I wouldn't say genius. Trading cards, my favorite thing by far. The trading card sets. We ordered, I think, 100 sets, and I think we sold probably. I might have like 10 sets left, so we probably sold 90 of the 100 sets. And you know what I mean? Like, it was just incredible. I mean, it was all Frank Boris's photography, and we put everybody in the set, so they felt everybody who worked for us on a steady basis was in that set. So they felt, because guess what? I put Jeff Carden in there. Referee.
Yeah.
He bought two sets. He bought 2 sets because he wanted 2 sets. You know what I mean? Doc Frank
was in there. Yeah.
Doc Frank is a high sought after card. But everybody was in there. You know, from you know, Tony and Ryan and Alex and you, myself and EJ, you know, and even people that didn't wrestle for us all the time that people liked a lot. Yep. You know, Mike Orlando, who moved to Florida, I still wanted to put him in the set because I knew people like Mike a lot.
Yeah,
you know, and Ali Rex, you know what I mean? Like, you know, they moved to Florida. Sean Carr, you know, when, you know, took some time up, but I still wanted him in that set because people love those trades. And they were, what the fans did is they bought them, and they're still available, fans, at $20 a piece. But they took them at the show, and the kids would go around to the workers and ask them to sign the cards.
Yeah.
And then sign the cards. And then something I did have, and then the pandemic shut it down, is I have uncut sheets of those cards.
Oh, cool.
So,
okay.
I do want to put them in a frame eventually and have everybody sign them and raffle them off. There's 2 different sheets for the whole set, a signed set of that. And I could probably get most of the people's names that, you know, to sign them. Some people I might not be able to get. Danny Moth was on there, and, you know, I know he's doing stuff with Ring of Honor. Really don't run into him at all anymore. But yeah, so that was the T-shirts sold extremely well when we had them.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, you did the programs, which you did a phenomenal job on the programs. I was showing Joe Rogers them the other day because he wants to do a program. He's like, who did this? I'm like, Scott. He's like, Scott? I'm like, yeah, Scott did that. He's like, oh man. I'm like, don't get any ideas. He's not doing it for you. I'm telling you right now. But he did do that. He's like, oh my God. He's like, how much did these cost? I'm like, you know, I told him, I'm like, we sold them for $5 a piece and we made money.
Oh yeah.
We made money on them, and we had advertisers and
hand over fist with those things, and the trading card, T-shirts.
Yeah. I just like to think of everything as being a team. I'm a team player for stuff. I want everybody to do their part in PPW. There was 5 of us. You know what I mean? There was 5 of us at one time that all had ownership in the company, and you have to have everybody doing something to make the engine run. Because without any one of those parts, there's probably no PPW. And I appreciate you saying that I do a lot for it. I mean, I do, but I believe that it's every part of the wheel has, you know, a different aspect of it. And, you know, without you, there was no TV because you turned that into another level. You know, and a lot of people don't know that you produced those skits, you and Jason King and Mitch, and, you know, the meetings with the blue toilet at the Red Roof Inn.
You always got to bring that one up.
You guys did that, and that was incredible, and it makes good TV. You know.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that. I always like, you know, you were the engine that got us down the road, and I just had a good coat of paint, you know, to make it.
And another shout out to another guy who did a lot for PPW, and a lot of people don't realize is Johnny Moran. You know, Johnny Moran was a worker on the show, but I'll tell you what, Johnny Moran is a good guy. He really, really is. He did a ton of work for PPW with Tony's students, helping them, and just he helped Tony out a lot with stuff. and just an all around good guy, and did a lot for that Scranton show. Him and Adina, they did a ton of stuff to get that Scranton show successful as it was at the mall with Coco Beware. But he did do a lot for PPW, and he was always there to help out. And he is really a good guy. There isn't enough good guys like that in wrestling that wrestle and will help you with promoting and ask for nothing in return. But I mean, I still believe our PPW roster was one of the best around, and it's pretty evident now seeing so many guys that we had getting shots on AEW, the main event, Casey Navarro, D3, you know what I mean? Big game Leroy, we had him a couple from House of Glory. Rembrandt was on there. Cody Vance wrestled for PPW a couple times. He's friends with Mike Orlando, came in, and we were just in the process of bringing him in full time. He was living in Georgia, and that's when the pandemic hit, and then AEW, and he's Dark Order 10.
Remember, Alex told us that Josh Fuller got to AEW, and then he realized that no, that wasn't him. That was actually Marco Stunt. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Alex is gonna kill me, but yeah, that was
two.
So let's switch over for a minute. You kind of transition this into also finding yourself doing high school sports. How does this opportunity and were you immediately like, yes, let's do this, or were you kind of uncertain?
Oh, no. This is what I always wanted to do. Always wanted to be a broadcaster. Always, especially sports. Love sports. So there's a post up on Facebook. Attention, Central and East Central Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, a whole bunch. They tagged a bunch of states. We're looking for sports commentators. Professional ad, do you fit the role? Do you fit this? Blah, 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 blah. So this guy posted, his name's Derek Rizzo. I don't know who the hell Derek Rizzo is. I see my name tagged on there by Joe Rogers, right? You need to talk to this guy, Paul Bo. You need to talk to him. So I look at it and I message Rizzo. I'm like, hey, I'm interested. What's the job? He's like, hey, it's high school sports, PA Sports Live. We live stream stuff. We're looking for a couple commentators. Are you interested? Yeah. Do you have experience? Yeah. No. Yeah.
It worked before, right?
Yeah. I'm like, yeah. Oh, okay. Never asked where I did it from or if I did it from. So he said, okay, we have a 10-game high school basketball season, 10-game season with Williamsport. 7 of them are basketball games. 3 of them are wrestling events, high school wrestling. Yeah, the Millionaires. So we need commentators I have some commentators, but I need some for a couple games. So he sent me the schedule. I said, I'd love to do the Hazleton game. That's where I'm from. So my very first game. So he says, come down. Now, he never even heard me, ever. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. So I got my rosters printed out, whatever. So I go down to the game, full suit, everything. We're up in this crow's nest, like in a press box. I had to crawl up there to get up there. So he tells me to go interview the coaches. I only know one of the coaches, don't even know the other coach. So I'm like, okay, I'll do whatever I'm, supposed to do. And I was calling the game with his brother-in-law, who I just met at the time. And, we called the game. And he was producing the game. And he said to me, you're really good. I'd really like to, get you to do some more games. We don't have many scheduled this year, but I need you for 2 more games because there was only 7 on the schedule. So I did another game, and then he called me for one game I couldn't do because I think Jonathan was going to one of the dances or something I had to be at. I couldn't be at. And I did another game, and then he called me one night at 5:00 and said, hey, there's a game at 7. Can you come down here in Bloomsburg? So I kind of, I made that game. So after that, he said, listen, did you do football? Yeah. Well, we have a 10-game season for football. I'd like to get you signed up for that. Would you like to do it? Yeah. Did you ever do it before? Sure.
Are you people getting this? Are you understanding the lesson?
So I did football that first year, did 10 games. I had a partner, but he wasn't there all the time. So the first year was a little bit like kind of hit and miss. It was nothing major. We weren't talking any kind of good, it was only a couple games here and there. So he said the next, that's where I met Jim Webb, from Webb Weekly. And Jim said, Jim's going to be your basketball partner this year. I didn't know Jim. Jim was the owner of everything, and he worked. It was PA Sports powered by Web Weekly. They did some stuff, and so Jim and I started doing basketball games. So the first year, I think we did probably like 20 some games. We went from doing 3 to like 20 some games.
Yeah, quite a jump.
And we never even talked about like what they were going to pay me. I didn't care. You know what I mean? I just wanted to do it. And then he told me, he said, here's what we're going to pay you. I'm like, really? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, I want you to know that we pay you guys good and don't want you to go anywhere else. So I worked with Jim. Now, this is our 5th year. This was our 5th year doing it. And Jim and I did like 36 games this year in basketball. For football, I do it with Rich Salonis. He's my partner for the last 2 years doing football. Football is once a week. It's Friday night. It's whatever the game of the week is now. We do in some playoff games. But I met so many cool people down there. I love Central Pennsylvania. I love Williamsport. I love Montoursville. I love Loyalsock. They treated me like one of their own. They think they thought until, I told them that I'm an actual broadcaster, like from somewhere. They said, you really intrigue us to watch the games. We like listening to Jim and you and Jim or Rich and I and, whoever calling the games. You keep it interesting. And there's other people that do the stuff down there, so that's a huge feather in my cap. And I'm not an arrogant person. I don't put myself on a pedestal. My dad always told me, if you're good, someone else will tell you you're good. You don't need to tell yourself you're good. So I prepare. I make sure I'm prepared. And 2 years ago, Rizzo called me, and this was in March, and he said, hey, he does a lot of work with Master P, the rapper. And he said, Master P has a company called Hoopers Only TV. His kids play and stuff like that. Some of the NBA kids play. LeBron James's kid's in it, and Scottie Pippen's son, and Dwayne Wade's kid. They're doing a basketball. It's almost like the McDonald's All-American game for underclassmen. For, I believe it was 10th and 11th grade or 9th and 10th grade down in Atlanta, Georgia. They want to fly you down to do the game. I'm like, oh, cool. He said, we have 2 play-by-play guys or 2 commentators, but will you do sideline reporting? Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, how does that make you feel when you get that phone call?
Oh my God. And he's like, I no pay for it. And I'm like, oh, even better. So the game was on a Sunday, and they flew me down Saturday down to Philly. We all met up in Atlanta. It was myself, Chris. He's from the Drexel area. He was a really good play-by-play guy. He does some work in minor league baseball and that. Markovich is his last name. I might be pronouncing it wrong. Former 76ers coach, Fred Carter, Mad Dog Fred Carter. And then we had another girl. She was an actress, I think, from California. She did the other sideline. She did one team, I did the other. So we all met up in Atlanta, and then they had a car waiting for us. We went down to the hotel, and we went to cover practice. And I met Rod Strickland, who used to play for the Bullets. He was playing. I think his son was playing in one of the games. But they had a big dinner for all the kids. Master P spoke to them. And then this is something that you helped me out with. I remember messaging you about this. They called me at 1:00 in the morning down there. And they said to me, it was Rizzo on the phone. He's like, hey, Bo, what are you doing? And I'm like, sleeping. Oh, we don't sleep in the ATL. I'm like, no, Bo sleeps in the ATL. What do you need? You're interviewing Lenny Cook tomorrow morning at like 9:00. I'm like, who the frig is Lenny Cook? You don't know the Lenny Cook story? I'm like, no, I really don't. He's like, look it up online. He was, the number 1 player, high school player coming out when LeBron James came out. He made some bad decisions. He got hurt. He lost everything. He was homeless for a while. Lenny Cook, super guy. I met him. I still message him once in a while, talk to him. So immediately I call you in the morning. You remember this?
Yeah.
And I said, Scott, I need help. I said, can you please help me out with this Lenny Cook interview? Can you just write me some questions to ask this guy? I don't know anything about it. I have to interview him in 2 hours, and we have to go to this breakfast. And you, like the true trooper you are, sent me a whole list of stuff to ask him. And the interview was great.
This guy was intriguing. I mean, he, like you said, like he was actually supposed to be drafted, if you can believe this or not, before LeBron James and
Correct.
Carmelo And then, he ended up getting hurt. And if you ever want to see a real good story, there's a lot of sports fans that cross over to wrestling fans. There is a film with his name, Lenny Cook, that made Tribeca, and it's a really good film. I actually started watching that a little bit. It's a good film, so check that out. Yeah, that's cool. And that's got to throw you for a loop, right? You're like,
it was just amazing. And like I sat down with him, and he was telling the story that he didn't go to college. They projected him to be drafted by the Bullets as a lottery pick, and the Bullets took Juan Dixon, and no one drafted Lenny Cook.
Yep.
And then he went overseas to play, and he got hurt. Then he came back and got in a car accident. He was in a wheelchair. They never thought he would play again for I don't know how many months he was there. And he's whatever. Now he's as old as LeBron, and he still plays now in pickup leagues and stuff like that. He was playing in like a semi-pro thing for a while, but his story is amazing.
How was his attitude? Was he a positive guy, or was
super? He does motivational speaking right now. That's what he does. Okay. He was working with Hoopers Only and Master P. P was bringing him in and flying them all over the place when they were doing different stuff. But that's another thing that's like Master P is very approachable. A lot of people say oh my God, you did that thing with Master P. How was he? He was cool. I mean, he was nice, and met him and took pictures, and he took care of us, and it was all because we were down there through Rizzo. But I mean, perfect, nice guy. Couldn't ask for any better. And they flew us home after the game. Went to the airport, and I was home back in my house on Sunday night by midnight. So it was a really cool experience.
What's that whole experience inside your head when you're sitting down in the plane and it's all done, and you're sitting on the plane and you hear the ding for the seatbelt, and you're going in the air, and you're like, wow, like, are you thinking, wow, I nailed that? Or are you thinking like I would, where it's like, man, I could have done this better? Or what, were you just happy overall? What was
I was happy. I was more, it happened so fast. So I didn't even have time. Like, I'm on the airplane thinking about, okay, I know one mistake I made. The kid took the microphone off me when I was interviewing him. He was 6'10". I couldn't reach him to begin with, but he grabbed the microphone out of my hands. Don't ever grab the microphone out of my hands.
Yeah, you hear that, Facade?
Yeah. So I was thinking about, not that anybody would notice that, but I'm thinking of that. And then I'm thinking to myself, is there more questions I could ask someone like Fred Carter, who was super, super helpful with stuff? Fred Carter was like the Dr. Frank of a wrestling show. Everybody knew him because he was a scout. He was down in Atlanta, and he was with the coach of the Sixers. He had everything. He's like an icon, and picked his brain a little bit for stuff. But super, super nice guy. But I was just like, wow, and now, with Web Weekly and PA Sports Live, Rizzo's Cam Media team. I mean, it's basically me and Jim. And we have a great producer, Cam. Rich is my partner with football. There's a writer down there named Chris Massey for a paper down there, does a fantastic job. He comes on. He's our halftime guests. Mike Lundy, he's a teacher in Williamsport. We brought him aboard this year to do some stats for us at the game, along with Jimmy Webb's son when he can't be there. And I worked with, I always tease him, Mike Musina's brother, Mark, a little bit too. I always tease Mark that he's the other Musina. But Hall of Fame pitcher, Mike, he's the coach for Montorzo. But I did work alongside Mark for a couple games over the years. And Mark's a good guy. He's a realtor down there, real nice guy. But we have a nice crew.
What's your preparation? How is your preparation different, should I say, going into a game of that magnitude as opposed to maybe a pro wrestling show or a regular high school football Central Pennsylvania game? Is there a lot more notes to be taken? Is there a lot more meetings beforehand? I mean, what is the difference between the levels there?
Not really. I mean, they had like a little press kit that we got to look over. They kind of let us do what we like. I write my own opens for every basketball game. I write them. Same thing with football. I write them. Whatever really we want to do, they kind of let us. We don't even have to basically proof it anymore. We just basically do it. Commercials, they tell us what kind of commercials. But whether I'm doing a single A basketball game or a state championship basketball game, my preparation is the same. I want to make every one of those kids sound like Kobe Bryant or LeBron James. You know what I mean? Like, I want to give them the excitement, the inflection in my voice when someone hits a 3-pointer. Jim's calling card is bang. He yells bang every time somebody hits a 3-pointer. And someone put together like a montage of Jim's calls. All you hear is bang, 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 bang. And it's pretty cool. It's different kids shooting throughout the year. But,
Yeah.
It's just I try to work hard at everything and keep the same level on everything. You know what I mean? Same preparation. But no, that was basically pretty straightforward. I was doing sideline stuff, so I didn't have to do a lot of notes for TV. But I did most of the sideline stuff, so that was kind of like, now let's throw it down to Paul, who's at center court with Jonathan Kukamunga or whatever his name was. He was, and these kids now are coming out of high school this year, a lot of these kids. And you're seeing them. One of the kids, I can't think of his name offhand. He's from Wisconsin. He's like the number 7th player in the country on ESPN ranked. I think he's going to Kansas. And then there's another kid that Jonathan, his name starts with a K. That's what he last year he came out. He didn't even go to college. He's in the NBA developmental. He's scoring 17 to 20 points a game.
Yeah.
He was just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, they always seem to miss Michigan. I don't know. They always seem to go to the Michigan.
Yeah. So.
Well, so then you ended up doing something really cool this year with I believe Loyal Sock, right, where they had gone pretty far in the tournaments and
state champions. They won the state championship. Yeah.
Talk about that experience a little bit. How does that differ from a regular game? Is that something?
Well, what you talk about a ride? I mean, like we went down to Philadelphia to cover them in the Eastern Final. They played Math Civics and Science, and that's a huge powerhouse school in Philadelphia. And they had a kid that was going to full ride to Miami, Florida. So we had to do a lot of research on that. The game before, they were home, and they played a game against Executive Charter out of the Allentown area, and they recruit through the whole Lehigh Valley and into New Jersey. They had a kid that's going to LSU. So it was a really a cool ride. We did some stuff out. We didn't get to cover the state championship game broadcasting because that's contracted out to PCN. But we did some stuff down there, outside, and they had a big, huge tailgate party we were at and stuff like that. And it was nice just to go see them there because they were all so thankful of how we covered them all year. And hats off to Jim and to Rizzo for what they dealt with the PIAA. No one knows. You talk about no one knows what goes on with a wrestling show. To get broadcasting rights for these playoff games for the PIAA is a fiasco.
In high school sports.
High school sports for playoff games. The regular season is fine, but once the playoffs start, it is a battle to get those rights to do those games. It's really, people don't realize what those two guys went through. I mean, some of them were day of the game. We didn't know if we were doing it yet until 12 o'clock noon, and we had to leave and be in the car at 1 o'clock to get down to Philadelphia because the PIAA didn't want to give the rights up, or, they were trying to get a streaming service to do it where they can get paid even more. But it's just I mean, they handled all that. I didn't do anything. All I did was show up with my notebook and all my notes and stats and
it's insane how technology can complicate things, especially on the high school level where, you used to hearing the NFL re-signed for $50 gazillion with CBS and Fox and stuff. But, I'm surprised, I guess maybe just naive to learn that that happens on the high school level as well. And all those politics are just the same.
I mean, 2 years ago, Hazleton was playing Williamsport in a playoff game, and we wanted to do the game and broadcast. It was at Hazleton. So Jim contacted them, and they gave him an outrageous price to broadcast the game. I'm talking outrageous. He said, listen, I did all these games all year, blah, blah, blah. They wouldn't give him a better deal on the game. He said, fine, we're not doing the game. They didn't want to take away from their gate. Okay. Well, as the northeastern Pennsylvania weather is so unpredictable, that night it sleeted and snowed and was just miserable. It was about 30 degrees. And I remember seeing in the stands pictures, my one buddy Randy that was on the quarterback club, people had pop-up tents in the stands just so they can stay dry to watch the game. There was about 30 people in attendance. That's it. And they didn't let us. So the PIAA took a bath there. They didn't let us, broadcast the game. But that's the kind of stuff that goes on at any level with that. You know?
I was gonna say I can't really feel too sorry for him on that story. I don't think. You get what you get. But well, let me ask one last Mark question. Was there somebody and you might have answered this early. Is Jimmy Hart your favorite person that we brought into PPW overall, or is there somebody else that you were a fan of before, or just a fan after you had met that became your favorite?
My favorite person we brought in was AJ Styles.
Oh, okay.
As far as Jimmy Hart was super, but as far as everyday down to earth person, well, you'll get more down to earth than Jimmy Hart, but AJ Styles was just, I'm talking star factor. AJ was just, we had AJ twice, super easy to work with, nice guy, did a seminar. Everybody got a lot out of his seminar that he did. And he was probably my favorite person we brought in to deal with was AJ.
AJ's really cool. I've, as a fan, I'd gone down to TNA and stuff, and I'd actually ate dinner with AJ Styles one time. And he's a very Christian guy. He prays before he eats. He's very silent when he does. He's very to himself, very EJ Kuiper-ish, where if you don't know him, he's not going to talk to you that much, but he's polite, he's a cool guy. I'm glad that you guys brought him in. And man, we almost got through this without me asking you about Mick Foley. Maybe the biggest PPW show, and probably you're going to correct me, outside of Impact, I would say that's
that doubled show. Impact. There was I think 11 or 1,200 people we had for Mick Foley. Yeah, huge.
Wow, the gate was much bigger as well.
Yeah. Oh well, he signed, I believe, like over 200 autographs in a 2-hour thing. That line was up the street for 4 blocks to meet him. He was super easy to do. He was great. He was super, super nice.
Forget about money. Was that the best PPW show that there was?
Money-wise, yes. I know you said forget about money. On a whole, I don't know. There's so many of them that were my favorite. Like so many shows that were so good. But gate-wise, absolutely. But we had so many good shows. I can never just pick one. You know what I mean?
It's hard to deny it or even argue that the gate was the biggest that night. You just look in the crowd and you see that there's not a space to sit.
No.
There's not 18 inches in that bleachers.
And they weren't only sitting on one side; they were sitting on both sides.
Yeah. Oh man, that was a couple months before I got there, and I was like, man, I wish I would have hit that one.
Yeah, that was huge. Ryback was big too. Ryback was a big show too. That was big. Booker T did really well. But we had quite a few big shows. Yeah.
Well, Paul Bo, I am a fan. You've done a lot of good things for me. Really have. You've done a lot of great things for me in wrestling and a lot of great things for me personally, especially buying my merchandise. I appreciate that. But seriously, I am a big fan, and I think
hey, we're still working together, buddy. We're the play-by-play team for NCW Wrestling.
Absolutely. Let me ask you. Let me transition this into where can we see you, Paul Bo?
Well, you can see me on NCW Wrestling along with Scott, because Phil Bravado's been put out the pasture, no pun intended.
I think EJ killed him on 5th Street.
We're going to be doing that, and I do some stuff for PCWA. I just did a show for them. I'm doing another one June 5th. The best of PPW, we're going to try to get some more shows in the hopper. We're going to try to get the PPW Unplugged podcast up on WYLN. We're going to have a video version of that with some watch-alongs. WYLN wants us to have content on there, so we're going to put that on there. They actually gave us another viewing time. We're going to be on Saturdays and Sundays. Once we get that up, they gave us 2 days to be on after Solo Spaceman.
Man,
but
I love that. I got to have really that podcast. That's
really it. I'm done with sports until August, till football starts. But we're starting to get back into wrestling slowly, and it is what it is. I'm looking forward to working with you on. Well, May 22nd is the show, so we'll probably have the video about a week later, and we'll be recording that post-production for NCW Wrestling. And I think that went really well for our first time doing it, and we haven't called a match together in 14 months, and I thought everything was pretty smooth, just like the old times.
Hey, the boss was happy. We didn't know much about what was going on with the storyline, so when we get better with that, I think it'll even get better. And again, like you said, the rust for me and you, it's been a year. I mean, it's been a year. It's so crazy to say that, but yeah, I'm enjoying that, and I'm enjoying this the show. I get to talk with friends of mine in this business like you, and just get to relive the good times. So I thank you for being on this. I know that I'm looking on this.
Yeah.
An hour and a half. I try to keep it, so we're gonna have to do this again because I know.
Yeah,
that
no one wants to listen to me talk for an hour and a half. I can tell you that.
Well, there's still some stuff I want to get over, and get through. So, we'll save that for the next time. But thank you.
Hey, don't forget King Kong commercial. Paul Bo is in that. King Kong and Baby. You could buy it at Amazon. Master P Induced and Snoop Dogg is another one for King Kong. King Kong energy drink. I was supposed to have some here, but I do not have any, and I would always give a credit to King Kong and Baby. We be Kongin'.
On that, we've paid all our bills. Paul's paid all of his bills.
I bought my shirt. Cardin says 2 more bills to pay.
And on that, we're out. Paul, thank you so much for everything, bud.
Well, thanks for having me and listen to my boring story.